Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Villa Park podcast. It's me, Rich, and I'm back with, as you know, Tuesday night is Fans Forum night, and we've got a special one for you tonight. We've not only got Martin live from Australia, Kev live from Bromsgrove, is it?
Close enough. The Licky Hills, that'll do, yeah.
But we also have the Athletics' very own Jacob Tanswell. Great to have you on board, Jacob. Thank you for joining us, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, all good, thank you. I'm not actually in Birmingham at the moment. I'm not in Sutton Coldfield. I'm in London, but it doesn't quite look as warm as it does over in Australia.
Yeah, yes. Well, I was very surprised when I jumped on to start the podcast. Martin was already waiting. 7:30 in the morning. There, Martin. How are you doing, mate?
I'm doing all good. Over the jet lag now. I tell you what, boys, jet lag is an absolute killer. You're waking up at 1 o'clock in the morning, and in fairness, even then, it's still warm. I can still wear shorts. But obviously,
Stop rubbing it in. Stop rubbing it in.
over the
Mute him now
over,
when he talks about the weather.
yeah, over the jet lag now. And then obviously watching Villa late in the evening against Leicester. So serious dedication to try and watch them at the minute.
Yes. Well, I'm sure you'll cope, mate. I'm sure you'll cope. And Kev, how you doing, mate? Good to have you on board again tonight.
Yeah, mate, good to be back. Always a pleasure, especially with this global as we are tonight with Martin over there. Martin, you'll be happy on Friday night because it's a decent time for you, isn't it? With an 8 o'clock kickoff for us, it'll be like, what's that, about 9 a.m. for you, mate?
Yeah, I'll be a bit more happier. I think it'll be 6 o'clock in the morning over here. So
okay, not quite as good, but not too bad. Cool, yeah, and obviously great to have Jacob here. Lots to talk about. Good time of the year. Villa's topsy-turvy season. Are we good? Are we bad? Is it standard? Is it normal? Who knows? Well, let's get the questions in, everybody, and we can have a good chat about it.
Exactly. And guys in the chat, I've already almost 100 of you watching, which is amazing. Please do smash the like button and hit the subscribe button. I hope to do it tonight. If we could do it tonight, it'd be amazing. We are literally 15 away from 5,000 subscribers. So please help us. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Follow us on all our socials as well. We're live on X as well. So please do. And get your comments in, get your questions in for Jacob and myself and Kev and Martin as well. So Kev mentioned it there, Jacob, with regards to, a bit of a topsy-turvy kind of season. We've had massive success in the Champions League. We're still 8th in the league. We were talking about Newcastle just before. They're obviously beating Arsenal at the minute. We're only 3 points behind them in 5th. Yet it kind of feels like it's not been quite as good a season, or we've not played as well as we maybe could or should have done, or thrown away a lot of points. What have you made of Villa's 24-25 season so far?
Yeah, it's been stuttering, hasn't it? I don't feel like Villa have ever really got into full throttle, really. They're contrasting home and away form. I think home form has been very good. Obviously, only lost once in the league this season, but they've had a few draws in that period. And as we speak, they've lost 5 succession on a row, and I think that kind of has hindered a lot of probably the feeling around the club. But if you look at really the last 8 results, they've been okay. And like you say, Villa are within touch and reach of the top 4, top 6, and it's a kind of league where it's different to last year. A lot of teams are between 3rd and 12th, maybe you can take points from anybody. So I don't think you'll need as big a point total as last season, but at the same time you do feel like there's more to come from this Villa team. They're still not quite at 5th gear
yet. Yeah. And Kev, you're always the carpe diem man, the most positive man in the room on the pod. But even you this season in the group chat have been a bit like, what is going on with Villa at the minute? How have you found this 24-25 season? Are you still thinking we can win it? Someone's got to win it.
Well, I always am thinking that a little bit, so I'm just putting my peppermint tea down. Sorry for the delay. So that's how rock and roll I am in the new year, peppermint tea. Look, I would think sometimes I'm probably the most positive man on Villa, like the Villa podcast scene. That I'm just so motivated by things like Denmark winning the Euros, Greece winning the Euros, Leicester winning the league, Jason Bradbury winning skating goal for Australia, all these crazy stories. And I look what we did with this relegation threatened team to get 7th. Surely they can't get 7th from that position. We did. To get 4th, they're not going to stay there. God, we could have gone top of the league last Christmas. So the heights have been hit, haven't they, by this club? It's a weird season, isn't it? I mean, everyone's beating everybody, and I do think when you look at the table, like Forest aren't going to go another 6 games consecutively winning them. Bournemouth aren't going to go unbeaten for 6 games. I mean, it's unlikely, isn't it, on how it works? And maybe we go on a bit of a run, and it's difficult because you feel like you take one step forward and then one step back. But when you look at how other teams are struggling this season, Tottenham's, Man United, West Ham's, teams that maybe fancy to do better, maybe we need to look at it and think we're doing really well in Europe, obviously, not just any old Europe. This is the elite Europe, It's not Cavos, it's like Val d'Isère, maybe. And we've got, obviously, we're still in the FA Cup for at least another 3 days. I won't mention the EFL trophy, but I do think we've got an opportunity now to kick on in this second half of the season. And you remember our form in 2023 was tremendous, wasn't it, across that calendar year? I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. It was reminiscent of those that can remember that year. Well, I think it was like a year under maybe John Gregory, where if the calendar year had been the season, we might have almost won the league or something. Just we happened to be terrible at the start of one season and terrible at the end of the other one. I just hope we can get a bit of momentum now and a bit of impetus, and the players can start to find their feet a bit more, because Jacob said it really well. It hasn't been that sort of fluid at times, has it? It hasn't been that cohesive. And I look at what we're doing and think I think there's a real big opportunity for us to still get at least top 5 in the league, which should get Champions League. There's teams falling away, and we've got the pedigree. In the past, we've done it. I just think we need to get some of these players that have been out of form a bit back in form and just stay on the right side of the injuries, and we got a chance.
Yeah. And Martin, just on that, with regards to players coming back into a bit of form, obviously myself and Sam did the full match reaction on after the Brighton game, talked about some performances, but Leon Bailey obviously didn't have the best of, I think certainly the first half, probably came more into it in the second half, but most importantly, he got a goal, which can you see that kind of giving him a bit of a springboard into 2025 and kind of pushing on, as some other players may do. Jacob Ramsey coming back from injury, for example, as well. Ian Maatsen coming on and doing well. Can you see particularly those players having a better sort of 2025?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think with Leon Bailey, when he got his goal, you could see that from the celebration, how much it meant to him, to get that goal just for himself, for his confidence, obviously the belief that he can now have in himself to go into the next game, probably against West Ham. So it's going to go a long way, especially if we are to bring in Donny Malen from Dortmund, if that's the case at the moment, since all I'm saying is that they're agreeing personal terms, but obviously a fee still to be agreed. So maybe that's a contributing factor again for Bailey when we signed Diaby, that there's probably someone there to take a spot, and now he has to step up. With Jacob Ramsey, hopefully his injuries record now are kind of behind him. We've seen from last season how he was completely hindered by that foot of his pretty much all season, coming back and injured again, come back injured again. So this time it was the hamstring. So hopefully that's past him. With Ian Maatsen, I have a bit of sympathy for Ian Maatsen. Like, he does so well pretty much most of the time he comes off the bench, but at the same time, Luca Digne is kind of playing out of his skin. But I think with 2025, especially after the performance against Leicester that Ian Maatsen had, he added such a different dynamic, and I really think that we need to add that now to this season, have a different dynamic on the left-hand side of the pitch, be a bit more attacking, be a bit more aggressive, which I think Ian Maatsen provides. As much as I do like Digne, I think he's got a great shout to be player of the season for Aston Villa, as he's pretty much the best player defensively, in my opinion. So I just think that if we give Ian Maatsen a run of games, whether that's on the left wing for Ian Maatsen, and we can still keep Digne on that side, then you have a good, solid defensive left side as well as being aggressive going on in the front. So if we give Ian Maatsen them run of games, I have no doubt, in my opinion, that he'll be there to stay.
Yeah. And Jacob, a couple of things from yourself regarding that as well. Some players hopefully springboard into 2025. Like I said, like Martin talks about Leon Bailey, Jacob Ramsey, Amadou Onana, who's had a bit of a stop-start time as well. Can you see some of those players maybe pushing on into 2025 and helping Villa to kind of finish strong?
Yeah, I think so. And Martin touched on it really well in terms of Luka Dean's currently first choice, but there I start feeling inevitably that Ian Maatsen is his successor. Luka Dean's contract runs out in 2026. He's obviously on a big salary, which is one of the reasons why Emery and Villa wanted to move him off. Only less than 2 years ago, even, and it's only because he's been playing so well that they decided to keep him rather than Alex Moreno. But at the same time, you do feel like Ian Maatsen is going to come into the team, establish himself. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes in around February, March time and really, takes that position as his own. And maybe Amadou Onana that first year, especially for an Emery midfielder, where it's so all-encompassing the remit of a central midfielder, it might take him a season really. And what's great is that Boubacar Kamara is there now, and he's obviously giving you that base. But who knows what's going to happen in the summer, right? I know there's been talks of a contract, but as far as I'm aware, nothing's been even spoken about. But Kamara, we probably don't want to mention it. He could be used as a PSR asset. So Onana might then come into his own second half of 2025. So yeah, these are players that hopefully you'll see a lot more of. Jacob Ramsey's basically been out of action for 18 months now, hasn't he? And if you can just keep him fit, get him 3 or 4 games consecutively where he plays really well, then hopefully you'll see the Jacob Ramsey of early 2023.
Yeah. Loads of comments coming in. I'll just go through a few of them. Obviously, people saying good evening, which is great. Gary says Bailey can't decide to put a shift in when he gets competition. Yeah, but sometimes players do react to players coming in and kind of putting that a little bit of pressure on. Michael says Bailey's had 3 injuries and still been playing, cut him some slack. He obviously mentioned that in an interview this week, which is quite honest and quite open from him. Reese says thinks Deeney will be gone in the summer, similar to the Tielemans and Louise plan. PJJ says Maatsen can play in midfield, so you don't have to drop Deeney to play him. Obviously, then you've got to drop a midfielder, though. And who else have we got? John says Kamara's contract is our priority. It will be between him and Tielemans for player of the season. Reese said Ollie Watkins is the safest PSR sacrifice. We'll get into PSR chat as well. And Rod says there justice for Duran, which we'll get into that a bit as well later. But I will also just again, Jacob, with regards to, I know you've done a few articles in The Athletic talking about Aston Villa's tactics and their play at the moment under Unai Emery. Maybe slightly different to previous seasons, particularly with the sale of Douglas Luiz. Utilising a lot of the running power of Morgan Rogers, but what have you mainly noticed about kind of the differences in this season's Aston Villa to maybe like last season and the season before when Unai Emery first came in?
I think the biggest change is probably out of possession. I think there's been a few nuances that Emery attempted at the start of the season, but he's not been able to do it simply because they haven't actually got 2 out-and-out fullbacks. And at points, Ezri Konsa's had to play right back. And I think, for example, at the start of the season in the early games, especially against West Ham, he wanted a back 4 spread out during the build-up phase rather than a back 3. And so Cash and Luka Dean would go high and wide, and the 2 6s would drop deep. So if you saw the West Ham game, Tielemans and Onana were very deeper than usual. They did that against Arsenal as well, and that's when that created the space for Rodgers to drive into. They've obviously had to go back to typing away because Cash has been injured and unavailable. But mainly out of possession has been probably the biggest difference. I'm sure everyone can see the biggest change in terms of that high line. This time last year, everyone was speaking about it, whether you're a Villa supporter, whether you just watched them, they were like this high line staggering. Now Villa's obviously retreated a little bit. They're more in a mid-block, and they've never been a hugely pressing team, but they tend to drop a little bit deeper and let play be in front of them rather than constant chasing behind them and appealing for offside.
Yeah. And would you say that it's been, obviously we've said it's been a bit topsy-turvy, but has it been a success, like changing the tactics slightly? And I'll come to Kevin a bit on this as well, because we've talked like constantly over the podcast about, how we used to start really fast in games and used to get right in people play it in the team's faces. So is it from speaking to Unai Emery and in press conferences stuff, is it kind of going to plan for him, this situation, or what? What would you say? Has it been a success?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions to be asked about defensively. I think obviously Villa conceding too many goals. Emery would admit that. I do think other teams, analysts, what they do with every other club. Nottingham Forest will soon find this out. They'll pray and they'll negate their best weaknesses. So they'll negate Forest as they've negated Aston Villa's, and one of Aston Villa's best strengths was transitions. Right, they scored so many goals from transitions last season, and the two reasons why that's been impacted is because teams are doing better at stopping Villa transitioning, and those key guys that were so good at that. So Leon Bailey, Ollie Watkins, Moussa Diaby's not there anymore, and Bailey and Watkins have been struggling with confidence, so they're not as ruthless. You'd probably say on transition, Morgan Rogers is the only one that looks a huge threat from it. So I think there's a little bit of both between other teams stopping it and Villa obviously not being in the best form individually. And for Emery, I think he still sees the plan, but as you said, they used to start really fast. I think things got a little bit slower, and that's probably because Emery wants to control games a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, Carl said there, it's our playing style. It's gotten slower. Then teams know how to counteract our playing style, simply pressing our defence to making mistakes. Kev, how do you think that Unai will get through this? Like, do you think we'll get to transfers in a second and try and get hopefully some inside scoop? But do you think it'll be a case of signing more players, or will it be to keep persevering? What would you say to kind of try and get that consistency back?
Well, I would say,
I know he'll say get Messi in or get Mbappe through the door.
I won't quite go that far. I mean, if we were allowed to spend some of the money that the owners have got, if it was like a different era of football, it wasn't so sort of skewed to, the just the way it's set up, shall we say, where some clubs seem to be penalised at the wrong time and others weren't, then you'd obviously want to strengthen with the funds that you've got, with the position that you're in terms of the competitions that you're in. When you're riding high in the Premier League, I'm sure in hindsight when we were, second, I think we were this time last year, or basically second, pretty much. If they could have brought in a couple of players, then it would have been almost been probably equivalent to that situation where we didn't sign Juninho all those years ago.
I knew you were going to say that. I was literally going to say it myself.
Everyone talked about it, didn't they? Like, you've got to sometimes kick on in these situations. And, I remember Newcastle bought Faustino Aspririan and obviously didn't quite get him over the line. But there's been plenty of situations, where Man United didn't win the league for 30 years, brought Cantona in all of a sudden. It's the missing piece. But we can't do it. We are restricted to what we can do, which I'm sure we'll get onto it. And Jacob, I'm sure, knows a fair bit about this topic because you've got over these days, haven't you, in football? It's obviously the old friend, financial fair play. I would have expected by now Monchi, with his reputation, to have got dusted down this mythical black book of like European contacts. And if Brighton are bringing in the best players in the world for like 15 quid and a packet of Watsits, then why can't we get some of these through? And I know Duran's obviously going to turn out to be an unbelievable asset for us in terms of the finances. We've done really well with obviously with the Tielemans on a free, Kamara on a free, but I maybe would have expected a little bit more. The one thing I was actually going to ask, just to sort of bring Jacob on this as well. One thing a lot of Villa fans have said is if FFP has been such a consideration, why have we arguably got two of the best left backs in the league and yet we're struggling in other positions? Why did we buy Maatsen? I know there's a link with like the Kellyman deal and the FFP, but why did we not strengthen another area if there was only a certain amount of funds available to be spent?
Well, that's the big question, right? And one of the reasons is obviously the Chelsea separate transactions, but they wanted basically Kellerman and Maatsen. So if you take away the 18 million for Kellerman, the 37 million paid for Maatsen doesn't actually look too bad, because that's how Villa will weigh up in their mind. I think that there's a great comment earlier. Apologies, I can't remember who said it in the comments, but it might be similar to the Douglas Luiz, Yuri Tielemans, in terms of you bring in Maatsen for that season, you allow them to acclimatise. Remember, Tielemans didn't start a league game for ages in his first season, and then next year afterwards, you sell Douglas Luiz and Ian Maatsen comes through, Yuri Tielemans come through, and I think that would be the same with Ian Maatsen. They did try to sign a right back in the final days of the window, but PSR was a huge constraint, and they just accepted. We sat down with Monchi and Bilagani a couple of days after the transfer window closed, and they accepted that they couldn't do everything they wanted to in that window, and the squad was still unbalanced to an extent, and namely that is at right back. So I've often been questioned, why don't Villa sign a right back? But I think the way that Villa play, with the left back being so high and so attacking, that was probably more of the situation they wanted to address.
Yeah. I had a comment, Martin, that I thought was quite funny. I can't remember who said it, but it was basically, in terms of what we should be doing, it was basically, here it is, Bear in the Garden said, stop missing clear chances and giving silly goals away. Is it literally as simple as that, Martin?
Yeah, I think it is literally as simple as that. As a good Sunday League coach would say, stop giving silly goals away and just kick them off the half the pitch if that's stopped to go. No, look, the goals that we've conceded have really been kind of gifts, as you would say. I mean, we've conceded a couple from corners, against Palace, against Liverpool, and even you could say one against Brighton as well, that we had a corner, keeper kicks it up the pitch, and obviously they go and get one. So that's a set piece thing, I think, and that's something that Austin McPhee himself will have to address, because even though he gets the plaudits of, how good we are in the attack of doing set pieces, but I think he needs to now ask himself a couple of questions, defensively, because we have conceded a few goals from set pieces as well, even from our own. So the questions will have to be asked there. And then defensively, obviously there is a link with a right back this January transfer window with Oscar Mingueza from Celta Vigo. I'd be honest with you, I don't really know too much about him, which is why YouTube is your best friend. So I was kind of watching him. He does give you a different dynamic in terms of Matty Cash. He's sort of like an Ezri Konza, but however, a bit more natural at right back, being able to get the ball, being comfortable in possession, not being afraid to get the crosses into the box. And he can also play centre back and centre midfield as I believe. And he's also one of the 3 fullbacks in the league that has 5+ assists. So it's kind of a good dynamic for a right back, that if you want to bring that type of player in terms of being in possession, and when you go out of possession, he's comfortable going in the centre, as opposed where Matty Cash, he's more of an out and out right back.
Yeah.
Where he likes to overlap. He likes to get himself into the box. And when he's kind of coming in centre, he's nearly found out sometimes, even though we probably are better defensively with him in terms of the stats. When we put Ezri Konza right back, we tend to concede a bit more. And that's nothing against Konza, but that's obviously just him playing out of position due to Matty Cash's injury. Where if we bring in that right back in Oscar Mingueza, it will definitely give us a different dynamic. It will stop Konza being shifted out into right back. So it would definitely give us different dynamics, and hopefully would show up things defensively.
Yeah, well, that's I think is what will give so much confidence throughout the team. You concede less goals, it puts less pressure on the strikers to score goals, because that if one of them, if Ollie puts one chance away, you've got a very, very good chance of winning that game 1-0. Whereas at the minute, you've almost got to score 3 goals to win the game. So it's pressure on the whole team at the minute, which is not good. So, Jacob, this is what everyone's been waiting for. Who are Aston Villa going to sign in January?
Yeah, so we reported last month. I think coming into the month, it was pretty clear what Villa were trying to do. So they wanted a versatile attacker that could play in multiple positions across the front line. Donyell Marlin obviously looks the guy that would fulfill that. And look at his track record, he can play obviously on the right as a 10 up front, and on the left, so that's perfect. Obviously, PSR annoyingly still a big factor, so that's why hence a delay in negotiations. I'll come into an agreement, because Villa have got a price that they want to pay and they don't want to cross, and Dortmund have got that, so it's just bargaining at the moment. And of course, that his future and bringing him in will impact Philogene. Philogene will be allowed to go, etc. If Marlon comes in, similar to Kosta Dalkovic and a right back. Oscar Mingueza, for example, the stories came out in Spain on Sunday night, I think, and we did a piece on Monday. And although it is accurate that Villa do like him, he's one of 3 to 4 targets that Villa are looking at right back. They really like his versatility, like Martin mentioned. They pointed that out in terms of he can play right back, centre back, and left back, which I found quite interesting. And like you say, he's got really good attacking numbers. And in Spain as well, Monchi obviously has got a lot of ears. He got his ear to the ground there, so I think that was something that could be done. But at the same time, Barcelona have a percentage or some rights to the player as well, which means that Celta Vigo want to probably ask for more money, and of course PSR is always at the back of the mind. So there's a bit of wheeling and dealing going on. I think the Jalen Philogene thing is probably a case in point, because ideally they would have liked to let him go, be it loan or permanent. Emery still really likes him, but at the same time, I'm thinking we maybe need a bit of wiggle room this month, but also in the summer as well.
Yeah, and is it a case of like? Because I remember I've spoken to Tom Colomasi, who's been on the pod quite a few times, friend of the show, and he's a lot of times said that it's sometimes not necessarily about like spending the money. Like they could spend the money. It just means that you'd have to kind of sell more players, or it would be more of a risk then to get back in line with PSR later on down the line when the accounts come through. So technically Villa could spend 40, 50, 60 million in January, but it would just put the pressure on more later on down the line.
Yeah, one of the Villa staff explained it as like a ticking time bomb in terms of, they could do it now, but you've still got to meet that PSR threshold come June 30. And what also, and I must admit, I'm not too well versed in this in terms of UEFA squads and having a certain amount of homegrown players. And if Jaden Philogene goes, who are you going to bring in? And that, for example, an alternative to that and a solution could be you allow Joe Gauchi to go on loan, and then you bring Villa Academy graduate as the third choice keeper, and that's where you fulfill the criteria compensating for Jaden Philogene. So yeah, it's a good example of Villa can sign players, they can sell players, but there seems to be a few quite boring knock-on effects that are basically disrupting everything at the moment.
Yeah, it is a frustrating one. Kev, I'll come to you in a second, but a few comments coming in. Gaz says, gutted the Philogene gamble didn't work. Rod said he's surprised Costa didn't work out at present, but trusts in Unai. Resources said the Rory Wilson situation has gone quiet. And then are there any youngsters knocking on the door? I'll maybe come back to that to see if there are. Obviously there's a few young players that are talked about, and possibly Louis Barry as well that's been talked about a little bit, Jacob. So I might get your comments on that in a second. But Kev, I mean, are you excited for the potential of like a Daniel Marlon or a Mingueza or one or two others? I hope like that right back position that definitely does need improvement. But yeah, are you excited to see what we can maybe do?
I'm really excited. I think we need a little bit of impetus into the team now. And obviously, I know we made a few signings in the summer, but really of those signings, who's really made an impact? Anana started well. Certainly, obviously he had an injury and maybe lost a little bit of form, but it certainly started off pretty well. Matsson's had his moments, and look, we're all big fans of Ian Maatsen and think he's a great player, but hasn't displaced Dini yet in the team. Philogene hasn't worked out. You've got to see obviously the two lads we got in the deal with Douglas Luiz. Well, neither of them are here, so obviously that didn't work out. Lewis Dobbin wasn't a particularly good one. I know a lot of this is happening for reasons of PSR, but as a team, you want to kick on from that fourth finish. You would have thought maybe you'd have a couple of players in that squad now where we're actually making an impact in the first team a bit more consistently. And that's why I think we've been hurt, because then you get a couple of players like at times McGinn's obviously form's dropped. Watkins, Bailey, clearly form hasn't been there. Cons has maybe not been quite the same. I know he's been shifted to right back, albeit, but not quite the same level. Torres has probably dropped off a little bit. It's only probably really, even Martinez has dropped off a little bit. He's admitted that himself. It's probably only really been Dean yet, and then Kamara since his return that you could say, and Tielemans as well. And obviously Morgan Rogers goes without saying.
We said that probably Ross Barkley has been the best signing.
Yeah.
Best
Absolutely.
player out of the new signings in terms of consistency, impact, goals.
Yeah, and to be a bit part player, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I obviously didn't mention Barkley, but as you know, I'm a huge fan of. I think he's an absolute quality footballer. I think it's a steal for the price at the age he's got, the experience he's got. So I think you want a bit of impetus, but you don't want impetus for impetus' sake. You don't want to bring someone in. And I don't know too much about the right back. I'll take Munchie's Black Book's notes on whatever he thinks for who he gets in that position. In terms of Marlon, I've not seen too much of him. I hear loads of mixed reports, but you get mixed reports about a lot of players. I've just got to trust the club and their decision-making process. And if he's got that versatility that Jacob obviously alluded to there, that's really important, because I think if you look at attacking positions now for our team, Jacob mentioned the transition and the differences this season, but we're not taking our chances. And, as you said, Rich, you've got to score 3 goals to win a game. So you want an attacker that can come in there. And that's the one thing about Diaby. Diaby was a bit hot and cold last season, but he was on the front foot, wasn't he? You know, and he did create stuff out of nothing. And we have looked a bit toothless because you look at it and think Bailey's not really been at it. I know he obviously got a goal at the weekend, but he's not done really much this season at all. Philogene, albeit from a great wing-back performance against Bayern, hasn't done anything. You know, Rodgers, he's so exhausted by the time he runs 100 yards that, you know, meters in new language, sorry, that, he, you know, sometimes his end product isn't there, but of course he's been great and Watkins hasn't. And it's been Duran scoring worldies that's kind of kept us where we are. So I would love to see. Do you know what I'm still gutted about? Joe Felix. I'm still gutted about it because I know it was rumoured and whether it's going to happen, but he's languishing on the bench at Chelsea. I think he could have been that sort of, you know, that answer to unlocking the key in some scenarios. But I don't know enough about these two players really and who comes in, but I just have to trust the club, don't I?
Yeah. That's it. And I did mention about Marlon. I think it's probably a benefit on 2 or 3 different angles. Like you've got someone who's probably not having the best time at Dortmund, that's maybe getting a bit of criticism, that maybe wants a fresh start, a different coach, different voice. You know, Emery maybe sees something in him. The way that he plays, like that direct kind of that direct, quick, pacey style can suit what we need. Then it's like, okay, what does that do to Leon Bailey? That pushes him on because we know how he played when Moussa Diaby was there. Obviously, there's a link with Maatsen as well. And also, like, that also gives you, like, 5, even if he plays well for 5, 6, 7, 8 games, when a player wants to come in and make an impact, that can give Villa that bit of springboard for January to kind of push on. And then you're into March and April, and already you've maybe won 6 out of 8 or whatever, and you're back in the race for Champions League. So I think it's kind of one of those that might just be timing and might just work, even if he's not, you know, particularly sort of a bit underwhelming for various fans or getting some criticism from Dortmund fans. But we'll have to wait and see. I've got to go through these super chats. Carl said, if Wesley is the main target, get him. No, not second choice. My issue with Spanish defenders is they're good on the ball, but not hardcore like Rudiger. And also says that won't waste 25 million on Marlon, would rather Caden Young, which is an interesting one. And Rachel said she's uninspired by Marlon. So yeah, interesting stuff. Not everyone's too keen. I mentioned younger players, Jacob. Like obviously, people have mentioned Louis Barry, Ben Broggio. People talk about Caden Young as well. What is the deal with Louis Barry? Because someone mentioned about him obviously playing on loan at Stockport. Then if he does play for Villa, then he can't really go and play on loan for another club because it's three teams in the same season. So what does it look like for someone like him and the other younger players in the background?
Rory Wilson as well.
Yeah.
With Rory Wilson first, I think it's kind of come to end with him at Aston Villa. I think tensions are quite frosty there. He's obviously turned down several contract offers. You know, and what he was asking, or his camp were asking, was in line with Morgan Rodgers and John Duran's first contracts. So that gives you an idea. He's got a lot of interest overseas, and obviously he can sign a pre-contract now. The issue is that he's got an ankle injury at the moment. He's seeking outside external help with that rehab. So I think that might be put on the back burner until the summer. In terms of Louis Barry, I think it'd probably be a loan or permanent. I think permanent would help with obviously PSR and everything like that. But if it's a loan as well, you could have a 6-month loan in the Championship. If he still does well, then his price will go up even more in the summer. So I do think his future is away from Aston Villa. And then you've got Broggio, who's a very, very good talent, but he's very young. He's still growing physically. So I think he's obviously younger, but he's slightly behind everyone else in terms of going out on loan. He's got a little back injury at the moment as well, so that might put pay to a potential loan. But you want to keep him for the youth league as well, where he's been fantastic and is a real key cog in that side. But there's a lot of really good young players coming through. You know, Patterson keeps getting mentioned. Leon Ruth, Aidan Borland. These are guys that occasionally do step up to train with the first team. Have played. In the case of Borland against Wickham in the Carabao Cup as well. And these guys that you probably keep an eye out for in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, well, we do a show called Lions Den Latest where we get Charlie, aka Academy AVFC, and he absolutely raves about. He's the youth academy's biggest fan. Like he's raving about Broggio and Jamal Jimo Aloba and Patterson and all these players. So if he had his way, they'd be in the first team straight away. So yeah. But we love Charlie's his class for promoting the academy. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, Martin, we've had a few chats about Louis Barry and whether he is good enough for the first team. But yeah, I think it's probably one where I've said like he's probably going to be alone. But it could be interesting to see what happens this Friday if he has kind of got over this minor injury, whether he does get named in the squad.
Yeah, I mean it's the FA Cup, so obviously you might have a few younger players that will come onto the bench or maybe even get a start. We all know Ollie Watkins is probably not in the best of form at the minute, obviously with Duran getting ahead of him. But that's not to say maybe, that Barry would probably be on the bench, because at the end of the day he's still a youth player in our mind. But he had an incredible loan spell in Stockport. He was absolutely tearing it up in League One and obviously League Two the season before. And I think if he's going to go on loan, I think a place for him like Sunderland, I think would be very good for him because, the atmosphere, they're battling for promotion to the Premier League. And I think if you were to put him somewhere with a good environment and competing, I think he would fit in really well as opposed to, going to the bottom half of the Championship and then you're struggling for goals, you're struggling for form because the atmosphere is not as good. So there is a lot to account for when it comes to sending him on loan to the Championship because obviously in League One he had a great environment, near top of the league, top goal scorer. Everything's going well around the club. So obviously you have to remember the environment. And of course the development is important, but you also have to remember the environment of the club. So there's clubs now we have to look at in the Championship and go, right, where's the best place we can put him in terms of environment and the development? So you need to mix those two really well. And I think Sunderland, in my opinion, would be a great choice when you consider they have a lot of young players, are one of the youngest teams in the Championship, if not their youngest, where they've got really good, exciting young players. And I think he would fit in so well. Obviously, then it's players in around his age. So, and I obviously, they'll have the same humor because they're obviously the same age and they'll have some similar interests. So I think that would be a really good place for him to, kick off again, get his goals back in, and I'm not to say that he's not confident. He's absolutely confident in front of goal, but just to get him back on his momentum train, which I think would be important for him. And I hope, in my opinion, I actually hope he kind of does get a game against West Ham in the FA Cup. I remember years ago, obviously, when we had COVID, the breakout, and we had to play all the youth players against Liverpool, and he obviously ran through the defence and Van Dijk couldn't take him out of it, and he goes and scores a goal, and we're 1-1 at half time with youth players against Liverpool, and we're thinking we should be playing.
That was mad.
But I hope he does get a run out in the FA Cup of Villa, and then if it's after that where he goes on loan, in my opinion, I think Sunderland would be a great place for him just in terms of the environment.
Yeah. Well, look, it's going to be interesting to see. I know Unai said he's going to assess him and see what happens. Just to round up the transfer talk, Jacob, it's been rumoured that a possible return for Douglas Luiz back to Villa Park. Now, are you hearing any rumblings of a loan move back to Villa Park for a good old Dougie?
I think that's going to...
Under oath, we want to hear this.
I think in every window, I think Villa will be linked to Douglas Luiz because Monchi and Vilagani obviously have said publicly that they would like to have him back if he was allowed to be back. And obviously he's not doing great at Juventus. But there is a reason why Villa chose to sell Douglas Luiz for PSR and not other players. So I think that's important to bear in mind. Villa are quite well stocked as well in central midfield. And it's especially next year as well, if you do welcome back Enzo from Valencia, who's obviously started the season very well as well. So Villa are well stocked in midfield. Douglas Luiz, I'm sure he'll be linked again. But as I keep saying, the Villa sold him ahead of other players, including Jacob Ramsey, Watkins, Emi Martinez, Ezri Konsa, to name a few. And there was a reason for that. And that's why, because Villa thought long term they would be better with Yuri Tillemans and keeping all the other players.
So essentially, what you're saying is that Douglas Luiz will be the new Jack Grealish rumour there.
I would love both of them to come back. Yeah.
we actually, I said it there. We actually banned Jack Grealish being mentioned on the podcast, so that's me getting a fine there. Kev, would you like to see Dougie back? I saw you kind of agreeing with Jacob in terms of fully stacked in midfield, but what's your opinions?
Well, you know what a fan I am of is I love him. I thought up until Kamara's injury, which says a lot about Kamara's influence, but I thought he was our best player last season up till Christmas at least. Just a tremendous, player. I think he works so well for Villa, setting the tempo, driving forward, obviously getting his goals, being the reliable penalty taker. Kind of a shame with him how it ended with obviously with the missed penalty with Olympiacos and all that kind of stuff. But I think for what the price we got him for, there was always that rumor he was going to go back to Man City. Then that clause, that date expired, and I just think it was a big part of our European charge on both fronts. But it's almost like one of those situations where when my kids eventually probably like go to uni or move away, I'll be with a heavy heart, but I'll realise it's the right decision. And Jacob makes the point very well. We've probably got arguably as good as anybody in the league in terms of central midfield. We used to make that point, didn't we, around, it was 0 for Tielemans, 0 for Ramsey, obviously coming through the youth system. Kamara was on a free. McGinn was 2.5 million. Luiz was the expensive one at 15. And if you add to that now, Barkley, Onana, obviously with a big fee. Enzo Berenachea, however you say his name, coming in, maybe coming back. That's the one area we don't need anybody. I think that's more of a kind of sentimental nod towards him. The one player we do need back from a vault player would be a Grealish of the season of 2021 2021 form, whatever, because obviously we've struggled a bit in wide areas, but I think that's an absolute no-go with the wages. So Luiz, my heart says absolutely all day long. My head says probably not. We need to spend that money elsewhere.
Yeah. I've said that a couple of times. I know I've done a few a daily transfer roundup, but I can't see it happening, unfortunately. But it will be gutting to see him playing for another Premier League club because he does look like he is gonna make a move because he wants regular first team football. We will move on to other topics. So, but before we do, please do smash the like button. Please hit that subscribe button. I've just checked. We're like 10 away from 5,000. We've got nearly 400 people watching. So there must be a few of you that haven't subscribed yet. So what are you doing? Please click the subscribe button, hit the like button, and keep your comments coming through for us and Jacob. Where should we go next? Let's talk West Ham because a lot of people have been talking about the team that will come out for the FA Cup and whether it's going to be taken seriously by Unai. I think maybe circumstance will come into it as well in terms of the number of games that we've got coming up. But it is a special occasion, 150th anniversary, and the kit was launched and announced today. What's the feeling around the camp, Jacob, about the FA Cup tie coming up on Friday night?
Do you know what? I genuinely do not have a clue what the team's going to be. I don't know how they're going to approach it. Obviously, you got the Everton game coming, quickly after that. Well, not quickly, but relatively speaking, it's not a week. It's about 5 days, which I think obviously takes precedence. And if we look at Emery's track record. For all his greatness, he's not got a very good record in domestic cup competitions, especially at home. I was really quite angry, probably angry as I've been after, because I don't support it after a game, that Crystal Palace game. I know a lot of people were saying, we don't care about the Carabao Cup. I just thought it's such a great opportunity. You look at right now who's in the semi-finals, and you think over 2 legs, maybe the second leg at Villa Park, you would fancy Aston Villa, and you think, what is the point of football and success if you don't want to win trophies? I hope they take it seriously, but I think it's also a good point that Villa have got a lot of good players on the periphery that didn't step up in that, for example, Crystal Palace game, namely Emi Buendia, Amadou Onana you would expect to start as well. These guys that are at good level, really good, but they're not playing every single week and they need minutes. So I'd hope those players come in, and you hope that that's complemented with a fairly strong team as well. The 150th anniversary, or 151st anniversary, whatever you want to call
Yeah,
it.
that's a bit strange, isn't it?
Yeah, the pessimist in me would say that Villa wanted to sell tickets, so they wanted to make this a grand occasion. It's not going to be great that there's a lot more West Ham fans than usual due to it being an FA Cup game, so they'll take up some of the ground for the celebrations. But if you're into that, then yeah, it should be a really good evening, and hopefully Villa take it seriously and they win as well.
Yeah. Michael's asking what team would we pick for the game. Martin, I'll come to you. Obviously, as Rod said, Everton will probably be the priority, but as Jacob said, Amadou Onana, Emi Buendia, he's been a bit kind of off the pace in when he's come on for like 10, 15 minutes in games. So it's an opportunity potentially for him to play a full match. Ian Maatson probably coming in at left back. So there's a good enough side there of players that are on the fringes to stake a claim for a spot in the Premier League or the Champions League side.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously with Buendia, he's been obviously a bit unlucky with that ACL injury. He was a record signing. He was supposed to be the next big thing for us after Jack Grealish, and obviously it didn't happen. Due to that injury, being out for a year, then we go and sign players, Morgan Rogers, then other midfielders like Tielemans, and then he's just now completely out of the frame. So if there's a move out for him, it would probably be taken with both hands by the club, because you want to try and recoup some of the money that you pay from now. That's not, I don't know how much they'll take, but it's a difficult one just for him, just due to that injury. And what was the other part of the question again? Sorry, because
just regarding players having a chance to stake their claim, like I say, namely Buendia, but also Ian Maatson, Amadou Onana, one or two others. So it should be, if he does make a lot of changes, it should be a good enough side, I would say, to get a result.
Well, look, we looked at the Carabao Cup, right, that we put out a really good side against Crystal Palace, and you were thinking that's a very good team for a Carabao Cup game. And look what happened. Now, I know you could say Palace went all out with the squad, but still, at the end of the day, you look at that team and you would turn around and say it still should be good enough to beat Crystal Palace in the Carabao Cup. But that wasn't the case. So maybe a mixture of young players who are a bit hungry in the squad. I think this should be there, like Louis Barry, you would say, Ben Broggio. These players that are hungry and want to prove something in the team, that'll probably give us that little bit of an edge. And then, but I do also think that in the FA Cup we should go all out, because if we're going to be in this position of inconsistency in the league, and say we finish 8th, 7th, for example, and you go in the FA Cup, we're in the Europa League then instead of the Conference League, so it will put us then in a much better position in terms of getting a European football in, and then we wouldn't have to sell such a higher profile player, as you could say, if we got to the Conference League in the league, obviously due to PSO reasons and all of that. I think we should really go all out for this FA Cup. Obviously, we're against West Ham, a team who's struggling in the league. Now, that's not to say West Ham will probably come around and beat us due to the track record at home in the FA Cup, and especially in the third round. But look, I think we should definitely be going all out for this FA Cup. Try and play for something. Go for the FA Cup. Go for the Champions League, and then see where we go from there.
Yeah. Lucas said, will Barry have to stay at Villa if he plays against West Ham? Yeah, he would, because he obviously has made an appearance for 2 clubs in the same season, so that'll be interesting to see what happens. But Kev, West Ham could have a new manager bounce. Talk of old Lopetegui getting the Chopetegui and Graham Potter coming in.
Yeah, did you see that the bit of banter I sent you earlier in the group? They've I don't know if you've seen this, Jacob, going around, this little meme going around. West Ham have stalled talks with Graham Potter because there's a Spanish manager in the mix called David Moyes in the background. He's got a sombrero on, isn't he, and a big moustache. It's good. It's good. I think Potter would be a tremendous shout. I think he's a really top manager. Real bright guy, intelligent thinker. He did a fantastic job at Brighton, and I do think that whether it had been, Klopp, Guardiola, and Ferguson's love child, they would have struggled maybe that year at Chelsea with everything that had gone on, and or doesn't have to be a love child; it could be within marriage, But I think they would have struggled to get anywhere with all those signings going on, and how tumultuous it was at Chelsea. whether that manager bounce comes in, whether he's announced in time, but you always think sometimes psychologically, even if that manager's out the door and it's one of the coaches that they like taking the team over, you often do see a bit of a response. When you add to that the fact that Villa, listen, Martin, I'm with you, right? You know, the FA Cup, my old man always used to say to me, it's the most important competition, the most famous competition. You know, it's the prestigiousness of Aston Villa as a club where we'd won the most by, like, you know, the mid 50s, and we haven't won one since. And for those of us that had the absolute pain of going to London in 2015 to watch us not even have a shot on target, it's not one we've taken very seriously in recent years. And I also went to Wickham away and Palace in the Carabao Cup. So now how we feel about cup competitions. I don't think Barry will play. I think they'll want to do something with him to get him off the wages. I'd probably expect as well, considering the amount of games we've got, is Ming's going to play every single game now Torres is out. So I'd expect maybe to be a change. Maybe the swing calls alongside Konza potentially at the back, or Bogard or something. And then, Anana, Barkley, Matson. It's a shame Duran can't come in after, because for Watkins. But maybe Watkins needs a bit of form. I do think, even with a couple of youth players, I mean, crikey, Liverpool won the Carabao Cup with a pretty much a whole youth team. We've got some really talented youngsters. We're a Premier League top team now. We finished 4th last year. If they want to prove themselves to be good enough, they've got to take the chance. It was interesting, Martin's point about Louis Barry, actually, because people forget this. He'll be 22 in June. Remember that all the Christian Perslow stuff. Like, if you're not ready to go at 18, 19, then you might have to think about what you're doing. He's not young anymore, is he, Barry, in terms of his age? And you got to produce the goods, and it's an opportunity if you get to play to show that you want to be part of this Aston Villa conveyor belt of talent that's come through, but to come with us on that journey. I am pretty ambivalent about it, really, which just surprised me, because I'm a massive advocate for the FA Cup. But I think even if we won that, if we end up getting a tricky tie in the Champions League, how seriously do we take the next round? And particularly
it's trying to balance it up, isn't it? It is difficult. You want to win every game, though. That's the thing, though.
If you have a bad run in the league, though, you lose, and maybe 2 out the next 3, or 3 out the next 5, and then players are muscle injuries and stuff. So I don't know, but the nostalgic sort of football, the truest that I am, I want us to put a full strength team out. I think they'll be gutted when it's on TV, isn't it? It's on terrestrial TV. I think the club will be devastated, probably writing to them. We can sell some tickets here, get it off TV. But no, I don't hold out much hope for it. Really, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I hope we win. I do hope we put a good team out as well. Kevin said we should beat West Ham. It depends how we approach the game, on the front foot or silly tippy-tappy football. And Aviation Train said if Duran wasn't suspended, we might have gone 1-11, replacing one with 23. So we could have put a team out 1-11, I think, there. Yeah. But on the Duran thing, Jacob, obviously it came out today, the transcript from the referee's discussion, and then the information from the appeal, where someone, I think, one of the judges said it was something that amounting to assault or something like that. But what have you made of this? I'm kind of look, it's done now. The decision was made, but it does bring it a little bit farcical with kind of where you see the conversation that was had, and they kind of didn't really know what they were doing almost with the referee and the VAR.
Yeah, I actually saw Anthony Taylor at Weatherby Services on the day of the game, and I just thought to myself, this could be something that's not a good omen. This could be something going on that day, during that afternoon. And before the foul, he was giving, or before the incident, he was giving so many fouls that were just needless. And he was just stoking the tempo, stoking the intensity and tension. And obviously, Jason Tino doesn't need much to argue about, but he was obviously starting to get riled up, and that was really playing into Newcastle's hands. And then, the audio we heard today, it went exactly how I thought it was, in terms of he didn't take a breather like Emery wanted him to, and what he's complaining about afterwards. He just saw the reaction of Fabian Schär and thought that must be a red card. I think anyone else wasn't sure of it, and that the red card was unnecessary, completely unnecessary. And I think the reaction is as a result of his actions on that day. The appeal being dismissed, and then John Duran being charged because he kicked the water bottle. So it's become a bit of a circus, and it's one that the PGA, MOL, and Anthony Taylor could have easily avoided. I'm quite bored of it now. Duran's obviously he's not going to get his justice because he served his 3-game ban. I think it's a really poor decision from Anthony Taylor, and any other person I think would have got that from Aston Villa's team. I think because it was John Duran, he's got a reputation for being some sort of maverick, and that meant that he must have done something really bad to Share. Taylor gave him the red card when really, being mature and sensible, he would have sent it to VAR.
Yeah,
Jacob, you bring up the referees, right? I just want to ask you, and you can quote me on the leg. I don't really care. But with these referees, right, and I obviously done this relation to a David Coote with his video coming out, and maybe has this, obviously this personal agenda against Liverpool, the way Klopp was treating them, and then different players was treating them. But that decision from the Duran red card, obviously the factor that also wasn't taken into account was Fabian Schär lashing out as he was sliding with the boot going into the crown jewels of John Duran, as you could say. That there was no card lashed out for him, nothing there. And then you have other games where decisions are being made, where you look at the penalty for Brighton against Arsenal, and then the same thing happened from Spurs and Newcastle, and there wasn't given a penalty. So I think that this thing right now, again, this is linking it back to the video from David Coote, where I think some referees have personal agendas against certain clubs, and not for the fact saying that game for the two teams in it, but maybe affecting the other team outside of that game and their chances as well. And I really does think that there needs to be an open investigation to the PGMOL, because why is it these inconsistent decisions keep coming out? And then not only the inconsistent decision, but then the explanation to these decisions. It's when you have to go and explain it, you're nearly making it worse. But if we see a handball and players like hands out there, say naturally because he's running, and it hits him, one player gives a handball and VAR goes, not enough to overrule it. And then let's say it doesn't get given a penalty, and they'll still turn around and say, well, his hand was in a natural position. So if that, to me, doesn't scream where there's an inconsistency with these decisions being made. But I really think that there needs to be that investigating, because it all's got, like I said, it's all going back to David Coote. Are now referees making decisions based on the feelings towards club? Again, not just maybe not in that match, but affecting other teams in the table. Yeah, let's bring this team up above now that team because of the way, Lopetegui was treating me, or how Pep Guardiola was treating me. All these type of managers, even again with the decision against Villa, or what Unai Emery was saying in the press conference, let's affect him from that game. I think that is coming into effect because of David Coote. But what would your opinion be on that? Now, it would just be an interesting opinion just from yourself.
Yeah, I think it's be very dangerous ground to say there's an agenda. I think a lot of referees are very professional. I think with David Coote, as we know, after the incidents, he was a pretty vulnerable individual, and I like to think anyway he's the exception to the norm. And no one would like to be shouted at the way that Jurgen Klopp shouted at him, and I'm sure he was just letting off steam. But I do think these guys, however much we criticize them, do get to this level because they've been able throughout their career to separate, and take away biases. From my perspective, I rarely like to go in on referees. I like to think that throughout the course of the season, as the old adage goes, luck will even itself out. I really don't like VAR. I think they make as many mistakes, if not more. And with VAR, we look at replays for the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we just talk about referee decision more. We don't just move on like we used to. But I do think saying as an agenda is a dangerous territory. I don't think that there is, but I do think it must play a part in terms of its human instinct. If someone barks you during a game, you just feel sometimes you must just feel, you know what, F off. I don't care about you anymore. I would probably think that.
Yeah, the best thing is that the old refs, like back in my day, Jacob, but they used to admit that the refs like Jeff Winter and like in that era, Uriah Rennies and that, they used to say they would just give it back to the player if the player was having a go at them. They would tell them straight away and and swear at them and tell them to F off or whatever, and say you'll be, I will give a bad decision against you if you keep going the way you're going. And I think sometimes there's obviously there's a balance, isn't there? But I think there's less of a relatability factor now with referees. And I know me and Martin had this discussion before about mistaking corruption for incompetence, and like, you know, I don't know if they'd even be that kind of clever to be, you know, to have a set agenda, or the game moves so quickly and stuff to kind of set that up. But yeah, I think there's sometimes like there are referees, particularly an Anthony Taylor, where the show's about them, you know, and of course referees are different characters. Some have got egos, some want to be the centre, some want to do this, some want to stamp their authority and stuff like that. But I think sometimes there's a way to do it, and they kind of feel like they're less accessible now to players, or to, you know, to kind of the average person. Like, and I think that's probably something to say.
That's a really good point, and so I think a lot of referees, and you know, I'm sure we've all had referees. We don't mind if they make a bad decision. If they just go, you know what, fair play, I couldn't see it, I might have meant it for wrong session, apologies, and we get on with the game. But I do feel, like you say, Rich, there's more of a coldness with referees now. They don't really interact with people, they don't interact with managers or players, because they're still doing everything by the process. It doesn't feel like there's that comment says that personal touch, everything's so cold. And maybe it's a reflection of society as well. We're less forgiving about mistakes now, so we will talk about a mistake that was incompetent for the next 3 to 4, 5 days, weeks, and that probably gets the referees back up, and that's why they probably don't want to have that personal touch anymore. And that's why they want to be a bit more cold, because they know that any mistake or anything they say might be misconstrued, and they'll be leapt upon. And I just do think PGMOL now have kind of taken a position where they're just very shouted and they're very cold and clinical, and that's to the detriment. I think if they just put their hands up sometimes during the games and have a bit of banter sometimes, I think players and supporters will be far more receptive to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to read this super chat out from Rod. It says justice for Duran. So yeah, thank you so much, Rob. We're there. But just to finish up on this, and just to, you know, before we close out the show with just a couple of final questions, Kev. With the whole VAR situation, PGMOL, like when it was first sold to everyone, and loads of managers wanted it because they were like, oh, this is what we need. You know, games are so important. There's so much money riding on these games. We have to get each decision right, etc., etc. We have to take away the talking points from the game. It's just made an extra layer of talking point, hasn't it? Because you don't just moan about the referee's decision. You now moan about what the VAR's decided to do.
Yeah, do you know what it is for me? Like working in sales type industry like you do, like you always want to be dealing with, you want to be going straight to the horse's mouth, right? You know, and when you've got layers of process and bureaucracy, you might have a HR department, and then a procurement team, and then if someone's got to sign it off. The more layers in anything, the more problems. You know, we've all had that situation where sometimes, you know, our product from Amazon stuck in some distribution center somewhere and it hasn't come, and it's someone's birthday, and the simplest processes are the ones that work best, and it's very well intentioned. I mean, the technology is brilliant, but it's about how the technology is implemented, and that's the key thing. It's like people moan about any, you know, oh, my phone's crap. Well, do you know how to use it? You know, like, do you know all the functions and the features? And it's a scenario where, I mean, on the Duran thing, we did discuss it at the time. As you know, I thought it was a red card. I thought it was a bit reckless, and I thought he could have got himself out of the way. A lot of people disagree with that point. But the thing I do agree with everybody on pretty much is that the referee should have took some time and assessed it properly. And he's got all these advisors around him. He's got people in his ear. Just take a step back, have a look at it. You know, if you're going to freeze frame that whole process, you would see Shah lifting his stud towards the groin of Duran, and maybe make a slightly different decision. The thing which I think is the most galling, though, is if you look at that same week, we then play Brighton, and João Pedro like elbows someone, basically like, you know, GBH, and he's allowed to play in that game. And Duran, this subjective, was it not a red card, can't play in the game. You know, Pep Guardiola boots a water bottle, and that's apparently fine. You don't get any kind of, you know, punishment for that. You know, Duran's booted all sorts of stuff in the past, hasn't he? You know, it's probably the first opponent he's booted, actually. He's shy. He normally boots like seats and water bottles when Emery's got the temerity with all of his experience to sub him. But why this one? It just stinks of inconsistency. I don't buy the whole, you know, corruption thing. I think, yeah, it's absolutely right. It's like there'd be too many complex and too many factors that would be at play. I do think David Coote is a bit of an anomaly, and I did actually feel a bit sorry for him with, you know, the whole pylon, and got to be very careful in this era, haven't you, of people's mental health and stuff like that. I just think the standard isn't good enough, and I think there's too many situations, and there's been too many scenarios where where it does even itself out, and too many when it doesn't. And someone put in the comments like shout out to Wolves last season, and it felt like every other week they were getting just dodgy decision after dodgy decision. So we thought technology would fix it. Maybe we need to just go back to a linesman, as they used to be called, or a lines person. Sorry, it's 2025 now, and a flag, and we just agree or disagree with that decision, and we move on. Maybe that's where it needs to be.
Yeah, we could get relegated to the Championship and go back to those days, but maybe.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Right, just to finish up, guys, we have 450 people in the chat, which is just amazing. But watching on X and on YouTube, we got to get you on more often, Jacob. Like it's obviously you, mate. It's obviously you. But yeah, please do hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button and help us hit that 5K mark. I've just checked and we're 6 away, so that would be amazing if we could get that tonight.
It's not Jacob. It's the Australian boy, isn't it? That's what it is.
Oh, of course, yes, yeah, exactly.
It's a different setting, yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's a bit confused because it's like this one screen's like really bright. What's going on?
The shades on. It's very bright. I'm carrying the podcast at this minute. I just need to cool out.
Exactly, mate. Exactly. But yeah, a couple of questions that we put out on Twitter. We've covered it a little bit with kind of outgoings, but Tom asked, are there any likely permanent outgoings for us this window? Obviously, we chatted about Philogene, but anyone else on a permanent basis looking to potentially go?
Yeah, Philogene is obviously a possibility. I think the reports today were a little bit premature. I think he's obviously one. Then Donker, who's obviously out on loan currently at Anderlecht, but they have an option to buy, and it would suit Villa if they brought that forward and sold him permanently this month. And I think apart from that, mostly they're going to be loans. So Sil Swinkles, maybe he'll play, like we mentioned, he maybe play Friday and then he'll go on loan to Wickham or a League One club. And I think Courtney House is a player that Villa would just let go for free. And who knows, if they get a good offer for other players, Diego Carlos, for example, I think he would go permanently. But problem is, especially with Pau Torres' injury, that Villa will need to sign a centre back, and that would be a risk, given that Villa are very light at centre back, and with Mings, who's only just come back from this big injury, being so reliant on.
Yeah. I mean, Mings has been brilliant since he's come back. To be fair to him, but we saw in the Brighton game him getting a bit cramped up, and then he was better in the. He was much fitter and better in the win against Leicester, and actually covered, I think it was like 40, just almost 15 kilometers in the game. So clearly he's kind of back fitness. But yeah, you're right. Being able to cope 2 or 3 games a week, particularly when the Champions League comes back, might be a bit difficult. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because they've got to raise some money for PSR, and obviously some of the younger players might be something to watch out for as well. And then a slightly kind of different question that you might be able to answer. Simrajit Bain says, what's the latest with V Sports? Because he said he read a while back that the plan was to bring players from ZFC and the academy in Senegal over to Vitoria Guimarães, but this went on hold following a UEFA ruling. So what are the plans now with regards to the kind of setup with all the clubs that Villa have?
Yeah, Villa's obviously got this relationship, and V Sports got this relationship, and there's a lot of things they're doing in the background now, but no one's really privy to see it in terms of exchanging information. Players, younger players, especially coming over between clubs, experiencing different cultures, environments, coming over to train for a few weeks, etc. I think we're kind of waiting for one player to be transferred between the clubs. I think at the moment, Villa are sending a lot of their players to Real Union as a favour to Unai and his brother Igor. So that's probably the only connection at the moment we've established. But I think you would expect once the multi-club model, like we've seen so many other clubs, is working and everything is in perfect alignment with information, like, for example, Villa share information, coaching information with Vissel Kobe, then I'd expect a bit more publicity around it.
Yeah, well, there was talk of that. Was it Mayarishi or something from Vissel Kobe? Yeah. Is there anything in that one?
As far as I'm aware, I'm not aware of it. Doesn't mean it's not true, but I've not heard anything on that. But I think he'd be again, one of those players that Villa would do well to sign because he's got a good attitude. He can play in multiple positions. But right now, with PSR, I'd be surprised if Villa did that as well as all the other things they're trying to do as well.
Yeah. I mean, it'd certainly do well for shirt sales, Kev, for creating new avenues for revenue, and you could then see an old Japanese tour for pre-season and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, literally, they're missing an absolute trick, aren't they? Pick the biggest global markets and buy a player that's from there. I think that's you've only got to look at what kind of revenue I'm sure Son brings in for Tottenham, and obviously Ji-Sung Park used to for Man United, etc. So yeah, it's an interesting one, this whole transfer thing. I am interested to see whether this window, Jacob, maybe you might have an insight on this. Any crazy Saudi deals going on? Any like Philogene to El Ettifaq for 472 million. A Chelsea going to buy like Aidan Borland for 44 million. Like anything that's happened in the past, like likely to happen? Do you think?
I don't think Saudis are kind of reining in their spending at the moment, aren't they, on these guys? But
Philogene's available as well.
I always thought Diego Carlos looked like the most Saudi player to me. From
yeah.
He just looked, I just thought, But he also looks a little bit Turkish league as well, which obviously we've seen reports in the last couple of days. And you know what, Fenerbahce are interested, but like we've mentioned, there's a lot of it, lots for Villa to do in order to complete that deal. But as soon as I saw that room, I thought, you know what, that sounds about right. Diego Carlos to either Turkey or Saudi Arabia, that looks like the most likely.
Yeah. Just to round off the show, I'll do a little round robin, short answer from all of you guys. So Martin, I'll come to you first, mate. Hopes and aspirations for 2025. What are you hoping for from Aston Villa for 2025?
Keep a clean sheet.
No
That's not happening. That's not happening. We said realistic. I meant to say realistic hopes and aspirations.
Okay, realistic hope and aspiration. Keep a clean sheet. I would say to win the FA Cup. I would really like a trophy to win. I think win the FA Cup is realistic if we can keep playing a strong team, and of course, obviously, we have to get a bit of luck of the draw from that one as well. So, for me, win the FA Cup.
Nice, I like it. Kev, what about you?
I want Watkins to score from open play this year. No, I'm joking. I'm a big Watkins fan, as you know, so I'm only putting his leg. But bit of fun.
Sorry, I thought Sam was back on the podcast there.
Yeah, well, it was just easy gag, wasn't it? Martin took my gag actually about the clean sheet, so I like a cheap gag at anyone's expense. So, I'm going to say, Richard, I want us to win the Champions League. I've said it. There you go. Someone's got to win it. Once you get to the knockout stages, play your best team, give it everything you got. Unai Emery, he's got a great record in European competitions. I was going to say win a trophy, but we're clearly going to give up on the FA Cup, and we're probably going to get knocked out by Blues at some point in the EFL Trophy. So, I just, you know what? Realistically, I want European qualification. At least Europa League, and let's just say, maybe semi-finals at least of the Champions League. That'll be a bit more realistic.
Yeah. Adamski says FA Cup would be brilliant. Michael said he'd love to see an FA Cup win.
Love it.
Kevin wants to see us beat West Ham on Friday. But Jacob, like in terms of your hopes and aspirations for Villa for 2025, but Unai Emery's mentioned about kind of now he's saying top 10, he's saying top 8, but he's got to be thinking like we have to qualify for European football, and does that match with your kind of hopes, expectations for Aston Villa for this season?
Yeah. Emery's not saying top 10 to the players. That's a good way of easing some of the expectations. I think for me, it'd be great to qualify for Europe. Maybe more realistically, qualify for the Europa League, complete the set in the last 3 years. That'd be great. More experiences. And for me, I think a two-legged tie against one of the big boys of Europe would be fantastic this season.
Yeah, that would be great. Jacob, fantastic having you on, mate. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on the Fans Forum. If anyone is living under a rock, tell everyone where they can find you on your socials and what you're doing at the minute.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. My Twitter or X and Blue Sky account are J_Tanswell, and yeah, you can find me on The Athletic. Just click the Aston Villa icon.
Brilliant stuff. Well, we hope to have you on sometime soon, mate. You're more than welcome anytime to jump on. Kev, Martin, amazing stuff, mate. Thank you for joining us from Australia. Have a great day over there, mate, and enjoy yourself. Kev, thank you for...
today, to be honest with you, lads. I think I'll struggle.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you won't. I'm sure you won't. Well, that's enough of that. Kev, thank you very much, mate. Great to see you again. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I'll be back with my transfer roundup dailies, hopefully talking about Marlon signing or Mingueza signing or something like that over the next couple of days. Obviously, we've got West Ham preview to come, West Ham match reaction, hopefully seeing us into the next round. So make sure you stay tuned to the channel. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button on your way out. Help us hit that 5K mark. Thank you all for watching. And as always, remember, we all follow the Villa.